Yes, that's right. It's Joe here live for Joyrider TV with your weekly Q&A, where we're going to be talking all sorts of things about catamaran sailing. So if you've got any questions, and yeah, I've failed to mention this the last couple of weeks, but if you're watching this later, and so it's not live, but you have got questions that you'd quite like to have answered, then just put them in the comments. And I will use those as preloaded questions for next week's session. So you don't have to be here live, although it's nice to be here live. Hello to everybody who's here live, of course. And in today's session, our key topic is going to be on driving or lifting in terms of the trim of the boat. Trim meaning forwards and backwards movements and how far we're putting the bow in the water. This is going to be a very good topic to look at. We're also going to be looking at the subtleties of rudder tuning if your rudders don't feel balanced on both tacks. And of course, we're going to be looking at a great number of other topics as they come up in the live chat. So there we are. That is where we are. That's where we're going. And I would like to kick off by saying greetings to Hussein in Egypt, kicking off the super stickers for this week. The super stickers are keeping the Q&A ad free. So there we go. Thanks very much, Hussein. So I'm just going to see we've got Justin in Texas in the live chat with a very good question on a topic that I'm quite keen on. And it is on the topic of filming the action. Yes. So hello, Justin, by the way. Yeah, so it's Hobie 16. And you may or may not have seen the video that I put out earlier on this week on the topic of trapezing. And even if you are a seasoned trapeze artist, I think this could be quite a useful one, especially if you are ever taking these trips around the back of the boat where you end up kind of like round here with the boat at this sort of angle because you've gone off the back. If this ever happens to you, I think this video could be quite useful. But anyway, what Justin asks, and I'm starting with this one because it's a nice quick one. How do I get the great shots where I have the 360 camera basically about here behind the boat? And I think they are great shots. Yeah, so the 360 camera in question is this one is absolutely fantastic. And I think I'd like to think that you've seen the difference in quality since I've started using this. This is the Max 2 GoPro, and it's a 360 camera, which means it films everything. It's got a lens on both sides, and each lens covers half of the sphere. And the quality is amazing, I think. So I'm putting that camera back there, and the way that I'm doing it, to cut a short story shorter, is I'm using half of an old windsurfing boom, which basically is coming up like that. So it's got the curve, and the curve on a 16 is really important. If you're sailing another boat like in fact, anything that has a boom that isn't a 16, so with a sail like this, you could just strap a straight pole to your boom, put the camera on the end, and that would be absolutely fine. Oh, hi to Greg in the live chat. Nice to have you on board, Greg. Just singing the praises of the Max 2. This thing is so good. It's made such a difference to the videos. And while we're here, hello to Bernhard in Austria as well. Bernhard Prolific on the Speed Stick leaderboard. New video coming at the weekend. Yes. So, yeah, you can use a straight pole on a boat which isn't a 16, but because of the geometry of the Hobie 16, as you will know, if you sail one, when you sheet in, especially when it's windy, the boom comes very low down. And if you had a straight pole, the camera on the end of that pole would actually be in the water some of the time if you had it far enough back. So the curve in the windsurf boom is really good. Now, the downside of having the windsurf boom is you can see the pole in the picture, but I think it's a small price to pay. Now, how am I attaching the windsurf boom to the boom of the Hobie 16? Now, this might make you wince a bit, but no good. Good. So if this is the 16 boom, what I've done is I have drilled 2 holes straight through my boom in the Hobie 16, and then I have made 2 holes the same distance, of course, in the windsurf boom. So it basically goes on like that, just bolts on, and then the camera sits on the end. How does the camera sit on the end? I bought from either eBay or Temu or somewhere like that. A couple of these little fellas. Can we see that? Can we focus, please? Yes, there we go. Which basically, in the end of any tube, you want the tube to be just a little, about the same diameter as the actual piece. And then you put this in, drill a hole through, put a small bolt through, be this way, to hold this in. And then you know that this is really attached to your windsurf boom. And then you bolt the camera to this, which means we are very secure, which is very important. So there we go. That is how that is done. All right. Hussein says, does it make a difference where the lenses are pointing? Yes, it does a little bit, because if, let's say, I am filming this direction, I would aim, like if this was the direction I'm mostly filming in, I would certainly aim to be having it pointing in that general direction rather than pointing like this. Because sometimes with all of the 360 cameras, where the 2 lenses join the picture together, there is a slight kind of artifact in the middle of the image, which if we just, all we need is, if I'm wanting to film this way, if it's pointing like this, then we won't have that artifact. If it's like this, there is a chance. Then if it's kind of like this, again, we'll get some sort of artifact where it's stitching the 2 together. So yes, it's better to have it pointing generally the right way. So a lot of the time I'll put the 360 camera under the boom like here, and then I'll have it this way round, so that one of the camera's lenses is pointing one on one tack and one for the other tack to get better pictures. There we go. All right. So we've got Merlin on board. I may have missed it, but since we're talking cameras, could you over the front camera setup? Yes, I can. So when you're talking front camera, you would be talking putting the camera, excuse me, here. So it's pointing backwards like this. Yeah, my go-to is actually a piece that I've made myself. Again, everything I source online, like eBay in the UK, has been really good for this sort of stuff. So I just so what we need is the two, and then like this. So this is like gold standard. Sorry, I just need to get a chain plate out of here. Here we go. So this is the best. The reason this is the best is because it is so secure, because it's metal, it's nuts and bolts. The camera, all right, let's get a camera. The camera basically bolts on through there, and again, it's a nut and bolt job that attaches that. So it's really solid, but I'll still use my safety lanyard on the camera because I am not very trusting. Yeah, so the camera bolts on like that. And then with this one, because we need 3 pieces for the camera to attach to, so I've basically bolted 3 pieces of this same material onto the 2 pieces, just with a nut and bolt through there. And that does really well with a bolt through here. And then this is the chain plate at the bottom of the forestay. This goes up here. And then in the first hole, next to the nut and bolt there, I've made my own fast pin. Basically, it's just a solid pin, hole in the end, and a bit of elastic. And then this is really good because it's quick, goes through there. The elastic, I just pull it round, hook it onto the pin, and then there we are. The forestay would be like that, and that will sit like that, camera down here facing backwards. Of course, the angle, if it's a regular camera, the angle of the camera is quite important. And if you're using a regular GoPro, I would strongly recommend sticking to wide as your camera setting and not going to super view, because when you go to super view, you get all these rounded, distorted edges that I know from reading the comments when I've used it, people don't generally like it as much. Yeah, so there is that one. But then there's the other system. In fact, another system is, this was a gift that I was given from Aubrey, who was sailing a Hobie 14 in Hilton Head last year. This is another system where it basically bolts on at the front, camera goes here, does the same as this, same as the one I just showed you, but I'd have to say I still prefer the metal, because even the strong 3D printed plastic has got a certain amount of strength, whereas the metal is dominating. There we go. So that is that, and that is that. And then there's also the Office Hands Dave system, which unfortunately I haven't got one to hand, but I will link the video to the Office Hands Dave bridle wire camera mount after finished recording this. I hope that's okay. All right, very nice. So yeah, let's dive into the key topic for today's session, or the first topic for today's session, which is driving or lifting. And the reason this has come up is because I've done 2 high wind coaching sessions this week, and it really makes a difference in knowing if you are really going upwind or not. And I know I see it so often with when I'm teaching people and they're not quite so perhaps confident in the strong wind, and it actually creates this kind of vicious circle of fear, Yeah, which nobody wants that. Because if this, and we're talking upwind sailing here, so the vicious circle of fear is, I'm just going to cut to the chase, and wind coming from here, we've got basically the two extremes of our upwind pointing angle. C is what we'd call pointing, and then A is what we'd call footing. Two different modes of sailing. Now, A, footing, is going to be much faster, but then what that is going to do is it's going to create this driving force on the bow, where, let's have some water, and like obviously the boat isn't going to sit like that, but this is for illustration purposes. So if we are sailing in mode A, then what we'll be able to observe, and this is in a higher wind, so like 15 knots or more, we'll observe that the bow of the boat is driving down, which will actually mean that there's only, like, on a 16, this is an inch or two of boat above the water. If we're on a sort of more conventional shaped boat, like a tiger shaped boat, again, the bow of the boat will be really driving through like this. And that is how we can tell that we're in mode A. Now, the reason why people who aren't confident in the stronger winds end up sailing in this mode, and the reason it creates this vicious circle of fear, is because by putting the boat on this driving mode or footing mode, like A, we go a lot faster, which is more intimidating in the first place. And by going faster, it means that you're traveling through the gusts and lulls more quickly, which means the boat is going to be a lot more of an exciting place to be, when all you really want is for it to be stable. And having just done the trapezing video as well, especially if we are encouraging our crew to get out on the trapeze for the first time, we want the boat to be going as stable as possible, nice and steady, which means we don't want to be sailing in footing mode. We want to be sailing more in pointing mode, because pointing mode, much slower, and you can really control the power in pointing mode just from small differences to our course. So we'll just head up a little bit for less power. If we're trying to get the crew out on the trapeze and the boat is sitting way too flat, then maybe we'll just bear off very slightly to get a little bit more power on, but observing the bow, because what we don't want to go is go into footing mode where we'll start driving the bow down. So why is it that most inexperienced high wind sailors end up sailing in this mode? It's kind of counterintuitive at first, but what it is it's because you're not powering up enough with the mainsail. So what might that mean? 9 times out of 10, definitely not enough main sheet in. But the other thing is maybe you've let the traveler out too far. So what you want to make sure you can do is sail the boat with the bow in lifting mode. And you'll know if you're in lifting mode because the bow will naturally want to start coming up like this. And that definitely means that you're pointing high. The reason that that happens is if that's our rig there, when we're sailing this high, if you see the direction of the wind to the boat, it's very much blowing not straight onto the front of the boat, but it's blowing near enough to the front of the boat, which means the wind is hitting the rig. And of course, the rig has loads of leverage on the hulls, and the rig is lifting the bow up. So that is how we know if we are in pointing mode. So again, to achieve pointing mode, we need to have more main sheet tension. And if that isn't enough, like if it's really windy and you don't want the power, but you want to be able to point, usually if you've got enough traveler in, which I would say is around the toe strap kind of area or closer, then you should be able to point the boat really close to the wind. And the trick there is to find your angle, is bring the boat up as close as you can to the wind. If the front of the jib starts to flap a little bit, then you have gone a bit too far. And you'll also know that you've gone a bit too far because it feels like the steering is no longer particularly positive. Like it feels like you're going to lose the steering at any moment. Yeah, so this is what we're looking at, and sheeting in is the key. So if you don't sheet in enough, you'll feel that if you're trying to go to pointing mode, the boat will pretty much stop. So and the usual remedy for that, rather than sheeting in, is to bear away until the boat is taking off like a rocket, bow is pointing down. And if you as helm and crew far forwards, like in a good upwind position on the boat, then you do risk sticking the nose in. So that is something to consider. There we go. All right, another use that that we could use this pointing or footing for is if we are on a race course. And like a really good use for this is, sorry, need to assemble my race course. All right, this is the start line here. This blue line is the start line. And maybe we're boat A. So as boat A, if we go for pointing mode off the start line, yes, it's going to impede boat C somewhat, because he can't sail into us. So if he's close to us, he'll have to go to pointing mode as well. And basically we'll both be limping up here pretty slowly. Much better is to go for a short distance, to go to footing mode, where you're going to be pulling away from the other boats because you're going to be sailing much faster. And this works really well, especially if you are a heavier team and it's windy. If it's windy, you're a heavier team, go to footing mode when you get, it doesn't have to be the start line if you're in this sort of situation. And then that's going to help to get you clear of other boats. And then once you're past or clear of other boats, so like he might be up here and we might be here, then go to, of course, we're not always footing or pointing. We might be what you might call regular, which would be halfway in between. So then you could just go to regular once you're clear of the other boats. And then you don't have this, like on the race course, one of the best, what would you call it? Best strategies generally to have is to never have other boats making your decisions for you. So, or reducing our ability to do what we want, or stopping us from being able to maneuver, or taking our wind, of course. So by sailing clear of other boats, by using this footing mode, can be very useful indeed. Okay, so there we go. That is footing versus pointing, driving the bow down or lifting the bow up, depending on what it is that we want to achieve. Yeah. And the same could go for if you're racing again and it's been a strong wind. So we've been pointing high and then the wind eases off a bit. We want to keep the speed going. So then we bear away as the wind drops, driving the bow down a bit to keep that apparent wind going so that we keep the power on for as much of the time as possible. There we go. Thank you very much. Okay, so back into the live chat. Justin says, I used the one Aubrey made for a while, but eventually it broke. Okay, yeah, so bow camera mount, eventually it broke. So that is why I'm not favoring the plastic for camera mounts, especially whenever possible. I do use, of course, the regular GoPro slider for like in the, oh, actually, I was using one today in the helmet, camera, or anywhere else. So like my custom under boom mounting, then this is handy because you can just pop it in anywhere where you've put one of these sort of sticky pad things. But the biggest and most important thing is, as you can tell by the amount of bits of string I've got hanging off everywhere, always security. Even if you think, that's secure. Like you might think, all right, I've done this bolt up really tight. I've just noticed this is split. Oh, it's a shame. I've done the bolt up really tight. I've tied the mount on, but this is plastic. Plastic can break. So that's why the camera has got its own security line. The method of security line, especially with the newer GoPros, is a little bit more tricky than with the older ones because there's not much space to put them. So what I do is I take a very thin line, like this is actually whipping twine, which is designed for making tidy the ends of rope, stopping them from fraying. And if you've got a camera which has got these little hinged mounting wings, then there's enough space between the wing and the joint to get that line through like that. And then we can have good security straight onto the camera. Very good. All right. Okay, just like to say hello to Nobody Special 313 tuning in the live chat. Thanks for coming along. All right, and we've got Max on board. Greetings from No Wind Rosenheim. Yeah, it's not going to help, Max, if I tell you that it has been absolute either champagne or champagne plus in Vasiliki, Lefkas, Greece this week. Every day, in fact, every day for a long time now. Really exceptional wind, very high quality stuff. I do believe that if you are interested in coming out and sampling some of this champagne conditions, Wild Wind Sailing Holidays has had at least, I think it's one, or there's a few empty seats, basically. There's a few rooms that are available in the coming weeks. So there you are. If you fancy it, just check out wildwind.co.uk, and then from there you will find out all of the information, and we could be hanging out drinking a cold one by Monday evening. All right, so we've got Francois on board from Bordeaux. Nice to have you on board, Francois. Hope it's all going well for you and you are having some of those champagne sailing conditions where you are. Okay, so next one in the preloaded. This has actually come from Justin, who just posed the camera question. Justin is one of the main contributors over on the Joyrider Worldwide channel. If you're not yet subscribed, or if you haven't checked out Joyrider Worldwide, it is a new initiative where anybody and everybody can upload their videos to one YouTube channel. So what we're going to create is a big library of content. And then once we've got a bit more content on there, I'll be curating the content into various different playlists. So then you just go on a playlist. Like if you want to see loads of a certain type of boat, just go to that playlist and you'll see, like, so maybe you're thinking of buying a getaway, then you could go to the getaway playlist and just watch loads of getaway videos just to really get you in the mood for getting one, the getaway. All right, so there we go. Yeah, so Justin says, what does it mean when you've got more weather helm? So weather helm is what we call it when we have to pull the rudders towards us all of the time to keep the boat going in a straight line. And so there is such a thing as heavy steering, and then weather helm is slightly different. Heavy steering just means it feels like the boat isn't particularly maneuverable, but weather helm is when, like severe weather helm, which I did have the other day actually on my own boat, is when you really have to pull the tiller extension as hard as you can to keep the boat going in a straight line. And it's really not a fast way to sail, because all of that pull is basically, the reason it's heavy is because of the resistance between the rudder blade and the water, and it's slowing you down, and it's also putting more load on your rudder blade, your rudder system, on the back of the boat, on everything. And if you sail with extreme weather helm for too long, something like this might happen, where your rudder casting actually just says, no, I've had enough, that will do. Or you might break your rudder blade, or something like that. So why would it be that you've got more weather helm on one tack than on the other tack? And it's quite a simple answer to the question, which is why I introduced it so fully. The reason would be that it will be your leeward rudder blade. So if we're sailing upwind here, it will be this one is not set up correctly. And when we're talking about set up correctly, like we've talked about before, what we want to make sure is that the rudder blade is pulling into the rudder stock as much as it possibly can, so that between the front of the rudder stock and the blade in here, there's no space for it to move. So we want to make sure that is set up correctly. I'm not going to go into how we do that just now, because my video on rudder tuning does that so much better than I could by drawing it on the whiteboard. Yeah, so that is what we need to do. And I had exactly that thing when I was out sailing with Ridley, the 45 kilo crew. Yeah, on one tack, there was so much weather helm that I actually had to start depowering the boat because I was concerned that I was putting too much load through it. Okay, there we go, Justin, and everybody else. Get the rudders tuned nicely and you'll have a nicer time. All right, we've got, oh gosh, how do I pronounce this? Asdeportiop in Portugal. Nice to have you on board. Okay, and then Francois says, then it means you are too much on the front of the boat just equalize the weight with the center of the sail depression balance. Yeah, I know. Okay, I can rephrase that a little bit. So this is in regards to the weather helm. If your rudders are set up well and you're still feeling that you've got weather helm, then what it is where your crew weight is on the boat is upsetting the balance. So as we would have talked about before, this one, what we've got on the boat is the center of effort, which I think Francois is calling the center of sail depression. So the center of effort, which would be in the first third of the mainsail towards the mast. And then we've got our center of lateral resistance, which much more straightforward to indicate this on a boat which has dagger boards. So what we're trying to do is basically have the center of effort aligned with the back of the center of lateral resistance. So it's just what that's doing by having more effort there. Here we go. Oh, I'll use this one. Is if we imagine that the dagger board is the pivot point on the boat, it's putting pressure behind, a small amount of pressure behind the pivot point, which is going to just very slightly make the boat want to head upwind, which is going to make it the most efficient for upwind sailing. So what Francois was also saying is, if we're too far forwards on the boat, then as well as our actual hull profile not cutting through the water quite as well as it might, we're bringing the center of effort further forwards in relation to the center of lateral resistance, which means then this is going to be changing to in front of the dagger board eventually, which is going to make the flow around the rudder blades much less efficient, and this could make the rudders feel really heavy. So depending on what type of boat you're sailing, what you could do, if you know that your rudders are set up nicely and you're feeling on an upwind course they're really heavy, just try moving your weight backwards slightly, just like that much backwards, and that can make all of the difference. Now, on a boat like a Hobie 16, if it's windy, you're going upwind, and you've moved your weight backwards slightly, but it still feels like the rudders are just resisting all the time when you're sailing upwind, then that is the time when you want to be loosening off your rig tension slightly, and that will just make the boat really want to go upwind rather than for you to feel like it is resisting against you. There we are. Okay, we've got Jens on board. Hey there. Nice to have you on board, Jens. Very good. And we have got Mickey Mordal on board, watching with my wife. Very nice. Greetings from Poland. All right, great to have you on board. So at this time, yes, the Speed Stick is going to have the new update video. I've been editing it all morning. There is a fierce amount of editing with these Speed Stick videos, crikey. But this is actually going to be, I think this is going to be the best one that there's been, because almost everybody who has a new entry on the Speed Stick since the last update video sent in a picture or a video along with their entry, which makes all the difference with the update video, of course. If you didn't know, there is a much easier way to get on the Speed Stick now, which is actually on Facebook. I set up a group called Global Speed Stick Competition and or Challenge, Global Speed Stick Challenge, and just join the group, and you could just drop your results off there. It's nice because it's got a kind of community feel to it, and everybody on there is so supportive and encouraging. So put your speed on there. People will say, yeah, you were ripping, things like that. And then that gets you on the leaderboard. And if you put photographs or video on there, I will then use those for the update video, which makes it look nice. There we are. Very good. Yeah, so what else? Yeah, so Speed Stick update video is coming on Sunday. There we go. All right, back into the live chat. All right, we have got Boulder DK. Hi from Denmark. Great to have you on board. Hope it's going well for you there. And I hope you've got a good weekend ahead of you, hopefully with a bit of action. All right, Francois says, on the Dart 18, we can do this. I know the rig is wrong. On the Dart 18 with no centerboard, the weight has to be at centimeters from front to back to get the steering neutral. Yeah, so very much the same as on the Hobie 16. If you're so, especially on a boat with the skeg hulls or with asymmetric hulls. So if you haven't got centerboards or dagger boards, your position of yourself on the boat, and the Dart 18, in fact, it does, because I used to sail a Dart 18 many years ago. I think I actually finished sailing the Dart 18 probably about 32 years ago. But before that, I sailed my Dart 18 every single day for I think it must have been 10 years. Yeah, and there's not actually any adjustment for the rake of the rudder. It's either locked up or it's locked down or it's not locked. So it does mean that it is your trim where you're putting your crew weight on the boat is critical to getting the rudders feeling neutral on the boat. So if at any time your rudders don't feel neutral, just try moving forwards a bit or back. There we go. All right, Boulder DK says, my daughter and I have enjoyed your sailing YouTube videos. Very nice. We bought a Dart 18. We've got all the Dart 18 sailors on board today. Nice to have you with us. And are sailing together. Thanks very much for making them. It's my pleasure. In fact, just going back to the Joyrider Worldwide channel, just published yesterday a video that's there was a team that went to the Dart 18 World Championships from Wildwind Sailing Holidays here. And they just did a bit of behind the scenes footage from the Dart 18 Worlds in Karnak, which finished just last week. And that is on the Joyrider Worldwide channel. So do check that one out. And on this point of the Joyrider Worldwide YouTube channel, from them doing that, I thought this is a really great opportunity that reports from events. We could have a whole playlist of event reports. So if you're going to an event, like whatever sailing event it is, you could just, the easiest, most straightforward way of doing it would be after the prize giving is, or when you're waiting for the prize giving to start on the last day, get your phone, get someone to point your phone at you like that. Make sure, most important when you're doing this sort of filming, is be aware of what is behind you. So have a nice backdrop, be aware of where the light is coming from, so you've got a bit of light on you, and be aware of your audio. So what does that mean? Wind noise. So if you're talking to the camera and you've got bad wind noise, then that means that it won't be as good. And an event report could just be make a few notes, say, okay, so just concluded has been the Hobie Getaway Inland Championships for Scotland. And it's been a great event. We had 3 days of racing, 13 boats arrived, and the conditions on day one were this, or somebody did this, and just give a little kind of like summary of the event. And then it lets other people know what happened. I think it's nice because these days people aren't reading reports so much. So videoed report, put it on Joyrider Worldwide. If you do that, I'll then share it and other people will share it and people will find out about all these events which have been going on. And at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do here, which a lot of people are trying to do, is really promote catamaran sailing, so that we can try to bring it back more to how it was like in the 80s. I know it's quite a, you know, set your sights pretty high there, because in the 80s catamaran sailing was huge. Let's take it back to there. And by letting the world know this is going on, or this just went on, it means people are like, oh, I'm not going to miss the next one. And then they might go to the next one. There we go. Okay. So back into the live chat. All right. Nobody special 313. Joe, are you from the UK, New Zealand, or Australia? The crikey really stands out. I'm from the UK. There we go. Yeah, but I haven't lived in the UK for a long time now, so maybe the accent is a little bit warped. And also, I do talk slightly differently in the videos because I try to make sure that the way that I speak is easy to understand for everybody, even if English isn't your first language. So there we are. All right. Francois says there we were 140 at the last Worlds in Karnak. Yes. Yeah. Very well attended. I think it's actually the second biggest Dart 18 Worlds ever. I actually went to the first one back in 1991, where there was over 300 boats. That was a lot. Okay. David is on board. Hello, David. Great to have you with us. Hello, Cat Sailors. Greetings from Northern Germany. All right. Justin says definitely need to invest in an Instamic. Actually, your audio, Justin, and your videos has been pretty decent. The Instamic, for those who don't know, is basically a microphone that looks like this. It is small. And the microphone itself is not windproof. So, but it's completely waterproof. And that's what is really what we're looking at here. Small, it's waterproof, records onto itself. So your audio recording is safe. And it's not like your Bluetooth might drop out and then you lose it. And the way that I make my Instamic windproof is I'll put it, have I got, no, what I'll do is I'll put it in like a Lycra. What I'm using now is like a Lycra headband that this sits in, and that goes round my neck, and then that'll go under my rash vest or my Lycra top. And so it's got 2 layers of Lycra, which gets rid of all the wind noise, and the audio quality is absolutely superb. Very nice. All right. So Boris is on board in Florida. Great to have you with us, Boris. Hope you're doing well. All right, nobody's special. I think you are special. Says, I love Joyrider Worldwide as a community project. Everyone is a sailor. They just don't know it yet. Yes, indeed. And there's a lot of people who have registered to upload to Joyrider Worldwide who haven't yet registered. So if you're one of those people and you're sitting on a video, then let's have it. There we go. All right, we've got Mihar SMSC on board. Greetings from St. Martin. Nice. I have a question about sailing upwind. I find I'm sailing about 5 or 10 degrees lower than the top boats. Any tips on what I should work on? All right. So I think the first thing would be, like we were talking about before, traveler and main sheet position is going to make a big difference to your ability to sail close to the wind. So unless and only if you're really overpowered, and it is a little bit type of boat dependent and on as well, but keep the traveler central. Or if you're sailing like a Hobie 16 Dart 18, you could travel out a little bit if it is really windy. But if you're sailing a boat which has a high aspect rig like Formula 18 or a Tornado, then keeping the traveler central is essential for being able to point as high as the other boats. Because with this tall sail, as soon as you travel out, the amount of sail that is pulling you up into the wind, especially towards the top, is way too far out, and you're never going to be able to sail that close to the wind. A DM 24. Okay, so a DM 24 is a trimaran, and but same thing applies. All right, and 15 to 25 knots offshore conditions. Yeah, so you might have to, I think, I don't know, on the DM, do you reef the sail? But yeah, I'm just trying to think what I would do. I think I would treat a boat like a DM in the similar way to a Formula 18, in that I would definitely keep the traveler pinned in the middle, unless it was absolutely kind of like not survival conditions, but you know, we're just fighting all the time. So downhaul absolutely cranked on. The jib luff tension cranked as well. Get the jib as flat as possible, and then main sheet cranked on tight, and then you'll have a mainsail that is as flat as a board, really efficient. And then if with everything cranked on tight like that, if you're still feeling like you have too much power, then start bringing the mast rotation so that the mast is becoming more in line with the boat. So if this is up the angle of our mast, can we see that? Let's have a blue one. So our normal mast position would be with the mast pointing just not sure where the shrouds are on the DM, but just behind the leeward shroud. And then I would be inclined to leave it in that position until, again, talking about an F18 style boat, but I think the theory is the same, until you get to double trapezing conditions. Then once you're into double trapezing conditions, we just want to flatten off the profile of the whole rig slightly by bringing the mast in a little bit. So halfway between the shroud and the back beam would be optimal there. And then if we get to the point where we're really starting to feel overpowered, bring the mast in so it's pointing right at the corner of the back beam, and that would be the most that we'd have it in. We wouldn't really ever want to have the mast completely in line with the boom. It would always want to be out a little bit, because otherwise it's not going to be doing its job in bringing the center of effort further forwards. Ease traveler in gusts. Main sheet is super tight. All right. Yeah, so Francois says also, if you can bend the mast to help flatten the mainsail, that will happen. Yeah, so really cranking it in. Ease traveler in gusts, main sheet is super tight. Yeah, I think on a bigger boat like that, then perhaps easing the traveler in the gusts would be the way to go, because then you're going to be keeping your sail profile consistent all the time. And by having the main sheet cranked, that is really going to help to flatten off the sail. Whereas, yeah, I can't say definitively which way is better, but what I always find works well for me is in the gusts, just easing a little bit of main sheet so you open up the top of the mainsail allows the boat to go much faster. Whereas I think keeping the leech of the sail really tight is probably, I don't know, it's going to keep it flatter, which should, in theory, help you to sail a bit closer to the wind, because you've also got more leech tension, which is going to drive you up towards the wind. The other thing that it's worth experimenting with all sorts of things, and it's nice to absolutely not know your boat particularly well at all, but experiment with how your fore and aft movements are on the boat. So whether like being about halfway between the shroud and the back beam is the sweet spot to sort of centralize the crew weight, or maybe a little bit further forwards. So just experiment with things. And if you're sailing, it also depends, of course, if you're sailing against other DAMs. Whereas if you're sailing against other classes of boat, it might just be the fact that other classes point higher. Could be. All right. So moving on. Statler Felix says, thank you for your program. Thanks for tuning in. At this time, in fact, if anybody's finding this information either useful, interesting, or they think, wow, this is solid gold, you can just let me know that you're finding this very useful by contributing to the cause by dropping in a super chat or super sticker. The super chat, super sticker is just located next to the live chat window. And that is what's keeping the live Q&A ad free. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm leaning in to read the comments. I hope that's all right. So continuing, Francois says it depends on the shape of the mast. Some masts need to turn completely to flatten the main. Some will need to be close to the axis, I believe you mean, of the boat to flatten the main. All right, so there's a lot of options basically depending on your mast profile as well. Okay, continuing. All right, Miha says we'll try more downhaul and adjusting mast rotation. Yeah, and there's also rig tuning settings as well, which might come into it as well. So I think on the more modern boats, the rig tuning guides are very useful and really set the boat up absolutely according to the rig tuning guide and set it up for your combined crew weight and for the wind strength that you're going to be sailing in. Okay, Nobody Special says, seems like a lot of cats and trimarans have super rigid masts that don't bend much. Yeah, they are much stiffer, especially if you were to compare them to like that of a monohull, much stiffer. And Francois continues, and depends on the way the main is built. Is it round in the front or cut of the panel? Okay, there we go. All right, so I think I'm going to park this here. We've been going for an hour. I think there's been some good stuff covered in this Q&A session. Thanks to everybody for tuning in and for getting involved in the live chat. If you are watching this later, then well done for making it to the end. And as I said, new speed stick video on Sunday. if you're going out sailing this weekend, then get on the stick, keep it safe. All right, just a few more that came in. Oh, right, Justin says, the rig tuning modules are a huge help and have helped me get my boat operating the way I need it to be. Justin's referring to the Joyrider Classroom series, where if you quite like this format, me talking, whiteboard, let's explain everything, then I did make a whole series of 120 videos, which are all organized into modules, which basically give you all of the background information for catamaran sailing that you could possibly need. So you can access the Classroom series either by becoming a Joyrider Academy channel member. You could access it over on Patreon, or you could purchase the course. And the price for the course is just 150 euros. And then that is yours forever and a day. Yes. And well worth it rather than just guessing. And it's helping to support Joyrider TV and keeping this sort of stuff going. So thanks very much. Have a great weekend. And I'll see you soon with the Speed Stick on Sunday.